Although Araragi is Shinobu's current partner and the one she ultimately picked, it would be rash to ignore her first kin, as Seishirou, the original Oddity Slayer, is one of Monogatari's most tragic and also most underrated characters, and so this is who we shall discuss today. So if you find yourself entertained at any point during the video, then consider liking, subscribing and ringing that bell, as I cannot explain to you how much such a small action can do for this channel, and if you want to support this channel even further, then perhaps check out my Patreon. Anyway, on with the video. Seishirou Seishirou is an incredibly layered and deep name, one very fitting of the series of Monogatari. His family name, Seishirou, can be broken down into two parts. First is Shishi, which means corpse, and Reia, which means trouble/evil influence or involvement. This references his involvement with corpses as the Oddity Slayer, but also how he ends up as a corpse himself. A reference to both his eventual death and the fact he is a walking corpse, a vampire. The trouble/evil influence part of his name then refers to his effects on Noetsu in the story. He caused trouble for the town by attracting evil energy to North Shirohebi Shrine. He was the one to cause the town to be plagued with so many oddity issues. He had an evil influence on it. His given name can also be split into two, with Seishi meaning samsara and Rou meaning sun, which when read as one makes a son of samsara. Samsara is a concept from Buddhist and Hindu belief. It is the indefinitely repeated cycle of birth, misery and death caused by karma. Now, I'm no expert, so sorry for the abridged and maybe wrong explanation, but samsara is considered a dukkha, which basically means suffering. Basically, people continue to suffer as they live life on earth and reincarnate due to desire, and only once you free yourself from desire can you break this cycle and attain nirvana, giving up your worldly desires and reaching happiness. And well, I think it's quite clear how this links up to Seishirou's character. He is the son of Samsara, as he was constantly regenerating after throwing himself in the sun. He constantly died and was reborn as he floated as dust throughout the world. He suffered endlessly and he constantly regenerated, much like the concept of Samsara. And the only way he breaks this cycle is by being rejected and consumed by Shinobu. She was his love and so represented his worldly desires. She was what kept him alive and what kept him reincarnating, because he still wanted her, and so Shinobu is his metaphorical worldly desires. Only when he is rejected and gives up on her, on desire, can he finally die and be happy, in other words, reach nirvana. His arc then is a microcosm of the Buddhist belief on reaching happiness. Seishirou was once a man of Japanese descent, a swordsman who travelled the land slaying oddities wherever he went. It was for this reason he was called the Oddity Slayer. However, there was one oddity he did not slay, one he instead befriended and may have even fallen in love with, Kishot Excella Orion Heart Under Blader, a vampire acting the part of a goddess. However, getting involved with this oddity spelled his doom, as the darkness appeared and sought to erase Kishot, the reason being that she was acting not the part of a vampire, but the part of a god. She was rejecting her purpose as an oddity and so was punished. The darkness though is indiscriminate and so pulls in anything around it, be it the target or not, and so Seishirou was attacked alongside Kishot. She managed to escape, but every part of him but his hand was consumed by the darkness. In a funny way, you could say that the darkness by consuming him was still doing its job, since he, an Oddity Slayer, was getting on well with an oddity and not slaying her, but that obviously isn't actually the reason for the darkness's attack on him in the story. Kishot, in grief and despair, sucked the blood from his severed hand and saved him from death. She turned him into a thrall, into an undead, into the very thing he lived his life to kill. And so in accordance to that, he killed himself. He threw himself into the sun. After all, suicide is the most common death for a vampire, and this was no different. As Seishirou the Oddity Slayer was someone who valued humanity, someone who fought against oddities. By being turned into one against his will, by giving up his humanity, he rejected his very way of living and so saw no reason in continuing to live. Sure, he could have drunk her blood to return to humanity, she may even have let him, but that was not something he could do, because even if he hated being turned into a vampire, he couldn't wholeheartedly say he hated her. This is why he called her Kishot and why he left her with a replica of the Kokorotori. Shinobu may not have noticed, not understood the reasons. She may have thought it an insult and a weapon intended to kill her, but as soon becomes clear, he didn't intend such a thing. He threw himself into the sun, turned to ash, and never died. He is a thrall of the mighty king of oddities, so the sun alone could not kill him fully. For centuries he existed as just ash, constantly dying, regenerating in an endless cycle, one not dissimilar to samsara. This only ends when his ashes accumulate in North Shirohebi Shrine, and for the first time he is able to regenerate enough to take on physical form. And once he gains this form, what does his goal become? Simply to see her again, to reunite with his master and friend, Kishot Excella Orion Heart Under Blader. Seishirou throughout the entirety of Shinobu Male has but one goal, to reunite with Kishot and replace Araragi as her kin. And why is this? Because rather simply, he loves her. And when I say love, I need to specify that this isn't strictly romantic love, but instead a more abstract interpretation of the word. Just think similar to what Araki and Shinobu's relationship entails, more than friends, more than lovers, just a basic need for attention and support. And hence, on a very basic level, you can describe the plot of Shinobu Mail as a love triangle, of Shinobu's ex, Seishirou, trying to win her back from her current partner, Araki, but again, that's a very basic simplification. In a lot of ways then, you can say that Seishirou did nothing wrong. Sure, he did bring oddities to the town, but that wasn't his fault. His ashes just accumulated in the shrine beyond his control. All he really wanted to do was apologise and make up with Shinobu. Sure, he does try to kill Araki, but as an oddity slayer, is that not natural for him to do? The reason I bring this all up is because we must remember whose view we see the events of Shinobu Mail through. This is of course Araki's. What we see is just what Araki sees, or more precisely, we see what he decides to see. Because Seishirou is male, and so he is not one in need of saving. I explain this a lot more in my dedicated Araki analysis video, but one of Araki's major flaws is his desire to save girls. Since Seishirou is not a girl and is Araki's rival, he cannot be seen as anything but an antagonist. Araki himself cannot shed sympathy or empathy for him, hence why Kanbaru steps in to speak on his behalf during the arc. Basically, even though Seishirou could very well be seen in the same light as the series' many heroines, a misguided person in need of help, since he is male, Araki cannot see things this way. And again, I bring this up to illustrate that not all we see may entirely be correct. For example, his motives are quite often shown to us in a rather malicious way, that whether Shinobu wants to or not, he will become her kin again, that he's just trying to win her back to regain his lost position. And while it's hard to say to what extent his motives are motivated by just love and a desire for forgiveness, versus a desire for purpose and a position by her side, due to the biased eyes of Araki we see him through. But I think we can all agree there are shades of all of the above within Seishirou. He is a man who feels genuinely regretful for his words and actions, who wants to reunite and reconcile with his old partner. He isn't doing this for some sinister reason, he's just doing it because he wants to be with her. However, at the same time, he is willing to use force to get what he wants, and he does want to try regain some kind of standing and meaning in life by reuniting with her. But again, I must stress that this is all in service to his feelings towards her and his desire to reconcile. There are obvious comparisons that can be drawn between him and Kanbaru, hence her involvement in the arc and her being used as a mechanism in the story to convey the feelings and thoughts of Seishirou, since they are the same feelings she too experienced. And I think this once again hammers home how, when viewed through a different lens, Seishirou could very much be another of Monogatari's heroine type characters. However, even if his motives are in the name of love, a true connection cannot be one-sided, which is where Kiss Shot, now Shinobu, comes into the picture. Although Araki is Shinobu's prince and the person of her current affection, she cannot deny whether she likes it or not, that there was once someone else just as dear to her, and that of course is Seishirou. The death of Seishirou, a suicide as a result of her own actions, deeply wounded her for a long time and closed her already injured heart. The reason she was so reluctant to accept her and Araki's relationship was because of this experience, because she feared being hated, being rejected. The reason she so often chose solitude is because when you're alone, you cannot be hurt. She was scared of forming connections because of the pain that can come when they fall apart. She was scared, given a wound, a kizu, by her first kin. One of the heart, one that caused her to close herself off. However, she failed to understand him, or maybe she chose not to. She failed to understand her first servant, and so when Araki chose to not kill her, she once more failed to understand him as well. She was too scared to form a long-lasting connection with another servant, and so wished to die instead. If she was dead, her loved one couldn't die in front of her, and they couldn't leave any more scars on her heart. Which may be why only when she gets her heart back in Kizu Monogatari can her and Araki come to reconcile their relationship, even if that is through conflict. Anyway, the point is that she deeply loves her kin, and would give everything, even her life, for them. And so when Seishirou returned, of course, she was conflicted. She was ashamed of what she had done, and more importantly was scared of him, scared of their connection, scared that the same thing could happen again, and so chooses to ignore the issue at hand. She seeks the comforts of her new life as a quasi-human, but runs away from the painful parts. She may be immortal, but even so, she shrinks away from pain, and that's not how it works. The good cannot exist without the bad. She is a coward for not wanting to see Seishirou and is cruel. She may have thought seeing him would be cruel, but an even crueler thing is to ignore him. The opposite of love is not hate, it is indifference. Only by rejecting him properly and choosing Araki properly can she rid herself of these conflicting emotions, but to do so she must face the painful and sad reality. Shinobu Male is an important arc as it's where Shinobu fully commits to her relationship with Araragi. She finally confronts her past and deals with it in a way that gives both her and Seishirou closure. It's hard for her, but life is. Being immortal means you can hide from the pain as everything heals back, but now in her quasi-human state she must confront the realities of life, which she does. By throwing down the Kokorotori at the start of the duel, she makes it clear to both parties that this confrontation is important to her, that it means something to her. She was too much of a coward to step in though, too weak to make the choice herself, and while that's because oddity or not, she is only human. And so instead, she entrusts this to her kin, to Araragi. She trusts him to fight on her behalf, because that's how strong their relationship is. They only die when the other dies, they are closer than friends and love each other more than lovers. They are one and the same. And so when Araragi fights, it's the same as Shinobu fighting. The fact he fights for her feelings is a very testament to her feelings. Her two kin after all are fighting for the right to stand by her side. They are fighting to prove the strength of their connection to her. So the one to win is the one who is stronger, who is closer to Shinobu's heart. They are both fighting for what they think is right, for what they think is best for Shinobu. Seishirou thinks she would be stronger with him at her side, that they could return to their former glory, and Araragi thinks she is happy just the way she is. The duel between the two is metaphorical of their feelings for Shinobu. Araragi had a way out. Hanikawa and Senjigahara's lives were at stake. He should have ran from the duel and helped them straight away, at least that's what some may think. But to him, his bond with Shinobu is just as important as the lives of Hanikawa and Senjigahara. Not to say she is more special to him than them, but that their bond is worth everything to him, the same way his friends' lives are also. You could maybe say that Seishirou, also wanting purpose and status back in his life, tainted his intentions and that's why he lost. That unlike Araragi, he wasn't purely fighting for Shinobu, but I don't like to so narrowly look down on their reasons to fight. I think what it all came down to was that time had passed, and people change. If this duel had happened 400 years ago, then Araragi would have lost, but because it happened now in the present, he won. Because Shinobu, not kiss shots, only kin, is Araragi Koyomi, the only one who truly understands her now is Araragi. Seishirou lost the duel and so he perished. But as he did, Shinobu finally appeared before him. She entrusted Araragi to fight for her, but only she could do this final step. Shinobu loved them both, but as she tells Seishirou, she loves Araragi more. However, this doesn't trample on her past feelings for him, this is in spite of those feelings. Shinobu still loves him, she doesn't go see him because she is frankly scared, but by finally showing herself to him in the end, she gives them both closure. She forgives him for what he did to her and apologises for what she did to him. When he committed suicide, their relationship was uncertain, but now they had closure. She did love him, but not enough to choose him, and as sad as it is, that was enough for Seishirou, for him to finally rest. You can say that his suicide attempt finally came to pass when he was struck by the talisman and eaten by Shinobu. You could even suggest that he couldn't pass on till his regrets were voiced, till his true feelings were said, but whatever the case, he died. Shinobu couldn't be there for him, she couldn't fight alongside him anymore, she had a new kin, someone more important to her than he is, and so she had to make a choice, not just for herself, but for both of them. Closure is had with his death for all three parties, it can be called nothing but a conclusion. Not a happy ending, nor a sad one, just an ending. Seishirou on the most basic level is a narrative tool used to illustrate Araragi and Shinobu's relationship, to allow the two to finally come to a conclusive understanding of their connection, an arc that has been playing out in the background of the story since the start of Back in Monogatari. By choosing Araragi over Seishirou, Shinobu makes clear her feelings, and by fighting for her against Seishirou, he makes clear his feelings too. It's a love triangle arc that has been deconstructed, flipped on its head and subverted, and it is a truly glorious thing, one of the reasons Shinobu Male stands as one of Monogatari's greatest arcs. However, although this is all true, it would be a grave mistake to write off Seishirou's brilliant character as just a plot device. He is a truly human character fueled by nothing but guilt, love and a need to belong. He fought for love to try cling to the memories he had of the past, and only when he was firmly shown the past had passed, could he finally rest. He's yet another example of how in Monogatari no antagonist is really a bad guy, that they are all just people, with truly human desires and truly human goals, as even if he is the Oddity Slayer, a 400-year-old vampire, he was once human, and he persevered through centuries of regeneration and rebirth for nothing else but the power of love, and if that isn't human, I don't know what else is. And so with that video concluded, I have now made a character analysis on every major character in the series, which is just crazy to say. Like sure, I ain't made a video on Senjigahara's dad, or Higasa, or Mizudori, or Sasayabu, or Shuzawa Judo, But let's be honest, none of these lot have the depth required to make a proper video on them, and if you can comment down below who all those characters are without using Google, then you are a proper hardcore Monogatari fan. And yeah, sure, there are some off-season and monster season characters I could discuss, like Mizomi or Beniguchi, but since most people haven't read them and I don't really want to spoil anyone, I'm gonna lay off them for now. That all said, there is still much more to discuss about this series. For me, character analysis is the first step to understanding a series as a whole, and so from now on expect analysis videos on themes of the story themselves, rather than just the characters that embody them. But I've rambled too much, so let's go on to comment of the week. Comment of the week comes from Tom Def, and thank you man, and I really appreciate the super thanks. If you are interested in my literary endeavours, then why not check out my books Gang Fluid Justice and People of Fate Volume 1, available at Amazon.com. And if you want to go the extra mile in supporting this channel, then consider pledging to my Patreon, where for as little as £2.75 a month, you can get your name at the end of the video, like Hikari Desu, 7SO, Rinjak9696, and Dewey. So with all that said and done, I've been Seth the Sin, the Deadly Sin of Geek, and I'm signing out. Stay safe, everyone.